who needs more time on the lecture? I mean, on the quiz. Okay. I think we're just going to start so you can do the quiz during the last part. Okay, so today we're going to have a introduction to PHP lecture. And up until this point, you guys have been creating web pages, but kind of all you guys have been doing is like making a really nicely styled website, not anything like dynamic web applications. So like you can't have like people log in or like you do like fancy stuff like that. So we're going to learn PHP today, or intro to PHP. But before we do that, so last week we learned that JavaScript is awesome, and we learned like functions, manipulation, effects and animations. You guys all remember that card lab that was like really cool. Events and callbacks, and get, post, and Ajax. So today we're actually going to cover, I'll just give a quick review on events and callbacks, and then we'll go right into get and post in a PHP kind of context, and Ajax. Okay, so event handling. So this is kind of what JavaScript is all about. Like you need it to be able to like interact with the user. So JavaScript event handling lets you handle events like mouse clicks, hovering, like pressing keys, like key up and key down, press on focus, which means like if you're currently focused inside a text field, blur, which means that you lose focus of the text field, etc. And if you're more interested in these kinds of effects, you can check out the jQuery API. It's just like, if you just Google like jQuery events, you'll probably hit it. We've also got callbacks. Do you guys remember what a callback is? Not that it's written in the lecture slide or anything. Who can give me, in their own words, what a callback is? You can just read this and paraphrase it. I want to pick someone randomly. Can't pick randomly. John, you choose. Okay, the person that just scratched their head. Wait, are you in this class? Okay, never mind. He's not in this class. Wait, pick someone really bad.
Explain callbacks.
Okay, Flax.
It's a function that lets you like control the timing you want.
Exactly. It is a function that lets you control the timing. Did it say that on here? Oh, it doesn't say that on here. Good job. Okay. So basically, if you want something to happen like right after you execute some other code, or for example, here you want something to happen when you use your clicks, you can assign this click event handler, and inside you pass it an anonymous function with whatever you want to happen. You guys remember what an anonymous function is? Yes. It's a function that does not have a name. It's usually used in callbacks, when you don't want to define like a whole other function and everything. You can also use callbacks if you have some Ajax or whatever call that does some interesting stuff and returns you data. For example, in this lab, today we're going to do an email contact form, which is really cool, and it's going to return some like, thank you, this worked, or like, oops, sorry, this broke, like message after you send an email. And you can actually take that email. So you have in your callback, you can have like some kind of output variable, and then you can do something with this output inside the callback. Does that make sense? So it just lets you do stuff with whatever data your server script hands off to, which is really useful when you actually want to do like dynamic kind of web application programming. Any questions? Am I talking slower?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, so what is PHP? Oops. Okay, so what is PHP? So up until this point, we've been doing kind of like more client-side work, which means the client is, if you guys remember from the first lecture, the client is like your web browser, and the server is server-side. So you basically, how the flow kind of works is your client, which is your browser, sends an HTTP request to the server, and the server kind of sees that request and they're like, oh, okay, I'll serve you these files. So it gives you like, the website files, for example, the HTML and CSS files and whatever images or whatever you need. And then the client-side browser interprets those results, I guess, and then renders it for you. So that's what you actually see on your screen. So how does JavaScript fit into this? So your server side does not execute any JavaScript. JavaScript is actually a client-side programming language. Well, at least in this class it is. So the server side has like the JavaScript like files there, and so it just sends it all to your client, and the client actually executes the JavaScript. So it runs it in your browser. And where do you guys think PHP fits in?
Server side.
Server side, right? So PHP, well, I guess I haven't talked about it yet, but PHP is kind of like this scripting language, which we'll get to on the next slide. So you have PHP on the server side and MySQL, which is like this like database store kind of thing. So PHP stands for Hypertext Preprocessor, even though it doesn't look like it does really. It's a server-side scripting language, as we discussed before. Like JavaScript, not like HTML or CSS. When you did HTML, it was kind of just building the page, and you're actually scripting stuff with JavaScript. But the difference is that, I guess in the scope of this class, JavaScript is a client-side language, and PHP is a server-side. So just remember that, that's really important. It dynamically writes HTML pages, which is really cool, and it has access to all of your servers, resources like databases, image processors, anything else that like your system can kind of run. And it's really cool because right now we haven't been doing anything with like databases or anything. So if you want people to be able to create accounts, like we don't have any of that in what we've been doing so far. But now you can have people create accounts, like log in, have some data that's associated with them, and you can like display pages that are personalized to the user, which is what PHP kind of does. Any questions? Everyone's good? Okay. So some use cases. So Facebook actually uses PHP or their own like hand-rolled PHP. So you can use PHP for customization. For example, Facebook shows you your profile, even though like it's different for every user. Like obviously they don't create a different page for every single user. They have PHP render that from the information that they have in the database. So you can tell me what kind of, can you guys see this URL? So www.facebook.com, profile.php, PHP files end in PHP, question mark ID equals and some ID. What kind of request is that? Do you guys remember? There's only two options.
Get.
Get. Who said that? You're awesome. Oh, we don't have candy, huh? Candy, we're like candy on the first day. Okay. Huh? Okay, go pat him on the back. So when you go to that URL, you'll get a nice customized page of Alex, which kind of like the PHP gets those requests, and then they do some stuff where they look at the database for all your information, and then they dynamically create the HTML page for you. So it's not like all of Facebook's employees are like making these individual pages and everything. It's dynamic. You can also do cool things like login. If you're not signed in, like you want people to see like, I don't know, like other people's pages. Can you see other people's pages when you're signed in? Or some application where you have like a dashboard. If you're not signed in, you want people to see that dashboard. So it's kind of like PHP can do cool things like that. And same with what I said for Facebook. When you use Yelp, Yelp does not have like HTML files for every single restaurant ever. It's dynamically generated. When you like fill in a form to create a new comment or a new restaurant or whatever, it sends a request to the PHP script, and they create that row in the database. And then when you are looking at that page again, it'll just grab all those rows from the database and then display all that information for you. Does that make sense? How PHP works? Very cool. Oh, there's a picture of Yelp. So we have this kind of chain of events. So first is the client who requests the file, and then the web server. Remember that client and web server interaction where the client wants something and the web server gives it to them. Now instead of just having plain HTML pages that the web server just serves up to you in images, you see PHP. And because PHP is a server-side script, it actually runs on the server. So it's not like the browser gives you the PHP script and then your browser runs it. It's like the browser does the PHP, it parses everything, it gets their stuff from the database, dynamically generates the HTML, and then sends the HTML to you. So nothing's different from the side, from like the view of the client. It looks like they're just requesting an HTML page. And after the HTML, the PHP has been parsed, the server sends the client the HTML, and then it's the same thing. And they run the JavaScript or whatever that's in the HTML.
Why do they use the word parse? I mean, I understand what it means, but I'm just curious about the use of that word.
I don't know. It really just parses it by like looking at what the code is doing and executes all this stuff. I guess it's a different vocabulary. Yeah.
Okay.
Wait, did I understand your question?
It wasn't a very good question. I guess it's just like.
It just means like executes the PHP code because PHP is like a scripting language, which means it's a bunch of instructions for like the computer or like the server to do something, and the server like does those things like gets stuff in the database, like renders some HTML or whatever, and it gives you a HTML file.
Okay, so parse just means like to
Do the thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Any more questions? All makes sense? You guys have a PHP lab. Okay. Very awesome then. Oh. Okay. Yeah, so I guess like there's a client to server interaction here, and then the server does this PHP stuff, and then it sends back an HTML file. Okay, so I guess reiterating on what I said before about PHP generating HTML files. So it actually writes the HTML files with any like kind of information it has from the user. So for example, if you have some profile.php, for example, you made like Facebook, I guess, and you have some PHP file here, and then this user A visits your website, and they send whatever like login credentials they have. It'll figure out what that user is, like get the whatever relevant data it needs, and then give this profile.php, or I guess an HTML file, like with like customized for user A, and same for user B. It's not like they don't see the same file. Like they don't see that they're requesting the same profile, like PHP file, but they're giving it different parameters, so they're getting different HTML files back. Does that make sense?
You're saying there's nothing, so like there's nothing to really distinguish because the HTML file is being written every time. There's nothing that would actually distinguish the file from just a static HTML file, other than the fact that you can see it's a PHP. When you look at the web.
I think from the browser's point of view, it's getting an HTML file back. So it just like it was just like it doesn't really know it was a PHP file because the server did some kind of magic and gave it an HTML file. Yeah. Okay, so it's important to note that the client doesn't actually ever see your PHP code. So here's your PHP code. I don't know if you can see, it's a bunch of coding, programming stuff if you're familiar with programming. And like I said before, it dynamically generates an HTML file. So this is what the client actually sees. Like if you go to some like PHP like file and it's like rendering in your browser and you say view source or whatever, you'll see all this HTML that's outputted. You won't see this PHP code. Okay, here's a bigger screenshot. And another bigger screenshot. Okay, so I guess the exchange of data between the browser and server is kind of the same. The browser is requesting these files. The server, like if it's an HTML file or a CSS file, it just like spits it back out, the resource on the actual web server. But if it's a PHP file, it kind of does some stuff and then gives it an HTML file anyways. So the same thing. Oh, okay. So except this time, if you're using a PHP file, you kind of need to give it more information. For example, like some login or password or cookies, which we'll go over later. Okay, so do you guys remember what get and post are? Because now we're going to go over them again. Okay, what is this? If you have some form and you're submitting some information, like this is a contact form by the way, like you have your name, your email, like some request, what kind of request will this be when it's sent to the server? Or what kind of request should it be under best practices?
Post.
Post, yes. So you want to use posting. Do you guys remember what get is? Let's look at. So get is when you have all this like information kind of appended to that end of the URL, right? Like google.com/whatever and like source equals this and design or like, and other parameters equals whatever. So like if you send this this form using a get request, what will it look like? How would you send this as a get request? Yeah.
Well, would the URL have your name, email, and request?
Yeah, exactly, right? So like in your whatever URL, like you're calling some PHP script and then you put a question mark, and then name equals, and then you put whatever is in here, and then email equals whatever you put in here, and then request equals whatever you put in here. Why is get bad in some instances? For example, if I wanted to have a login form, why is get bad? Yeah.
It's not very secure.
Yeah, it's not secure because it basically sends the password like in your URL, right? Like anyone who's like watching you can like see it, or any like kind of like web sniffer that's like looking at your URLs can see your password in clear text. So that's why you want to use post for forms. We're also going to go over cookies. So cookies, does anyone here know what cookies are? Not the edible ones. Yes.
Cookies are like